On today's show, the first game the Padres played in Seoul showed us a lot of what made them so frustrating to watch and disappointing to bear witness to in 2023, while Game 2 showed us a lot of what the Padres could be.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Friday, March 22nd. As always, I'm your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly, I promise you, not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiipeno, or at LO_Padres. My voice got a little bit weird there. Check that out. Also, check out Locked On Padres on the old YouTube if YouTube podcasting experience is more of your thing. For those unfamiliar, I am a staff writer over at Just Baseball. That is my main place where I cover baseball, where you can go check out right now. I just gave my season preview for the 2024 Padres and explained and broke down the whole team and what I'm feeling about them. Go check that out on the website. I also have a new show coming out either this week or next week, one of the two. I don't know when, but look forward to that as well. Today's episode, guys, we're going to be covering Game 2 of the Padres series in Seoul. We're doing another game recap. You know why? Because we have to now go back to spring training. And I am, game recaps aren't necessarily the crux of the Locked On Padres podcast. That isn't something that I want to rely on and make that the only thing that we do on this here show. But when it's this early on and we just started, I am down to recap every little detail of every game, let alone just these two special ones in Seoul. And look, Game 1 was disappointing, as I said in the intro. It really reminded you a lot of the Padres in 2023, because that year, what did they not do? They struggled. They had weird things occur where they seemed allergic to winning. And in this case, we had, Luis Campusano grinding into a double play with the bases loaded. That was really bad. And then you have later on in the game, more famously, Jake Cronenworth's glove webbing not working. And also the question of whether we put in the right reliever, right? That was the exact same type of scenarios that occurred throughout all of 2023. The next game, however, was very much the opposite. We got ourselves an old-fashioned slugfest in Seoul, and it was a lot of fun to watch if you got to see it from the beginning like me. Even if you got to see the replay and whatnot, it was still a lot of fun. But this one was great. I really enjoyed it. It is somehow not the biggest story governing this series anymore because of the Ohtani scandal or whatever you want to call it, which I might have more thoughts with on Monday. I want to wait until more information comes out. But This was a lot of fun, and it's crazy because I would say the defining kind of storyline from this, and I'm not trying to be like Dodger loving or anything like that, I think it's just true, is Yoshinobu Yamamoto making his major league debut. And frankly, this was kind of the game that I was a little bit nervous for, because I'm really high on Yamamoto. I think he's going to be awesome. I think that the break on all of his pitches, the movement on his pitches, the velocity on the movement of his pitches is just doesn't seem to have any MLB comparison. There's really never been any pitcher with that repertoire. Now, he's going to have to get used to Major League offenses, so it's not a guarantee that he's going to come out and be the Cy Young winner his first year. Although, frankly, it's an interesting bet if you did decide to do that. Shout out FanDuel. So that's another thing. But instead, he comes out and gets absolutely blasted by this Padres team, showing a little bit of gall, a little bit of temerity, and bouncing back from a disappointing offensive showing and starting off immediately, tagging Yamamoto for 5 earned runs in just 1 inning. He doesn't make it past 1 inning. That's it. They have to bring in the rest of their bullpen for the rest of the game, and it was a shootout. 15-11 final score in favor of the Padres. Jake Cronenworth, I want to talk about him real quick. I mentioned it on yesterday's show. A lot of people asked me, why the heck is he batting third? Very happy that not only Jake Cronenworth redeemed himself, but also me, because I have been defending that move, and I take a lot of my opinion on Cronenworth batting third from AJ Casval, who I think wrote a very convincing article over at MLB.com. And my thing is, I'm all for putting Cronenworth in the best situation to succeed, and you need lefty diversity in a very righty-heavy lineup, right? You don't just want to have all your lefties at the bottom, because then teams can exploit that more. And instead, if you look at numbers third hole isn't necessarily the spot where most of the RBI opportunities actually take place, apparently. And instead, you have Bogaerts and Tatis in front of him. They do a good job getting on base. Tatis redeeming himself, too. He gets an RBI in this game, going 2 for 4 with a walk as well. And Xander Bogaerts keeping up his hot 2-game start, 2 for 5 with 3 runs scored and 2 RBIs and a walk. And with Xander, I think that there was a scary moment in this game in which he was... Was it a double or did he steal a base? He didn't steal a base. I forgot how he got to second. But he got to second at one point, and it looked like he jammed his finger. And my immediate thought was like, oh my gosh, just please don't be the wrist. Because we literally saw last year how much that affected his game. Like, he started off the season on fire those first, 3 or so weeks, and then just completely cratered after that. And then after some time and healing, then he returned to his usual self at the end of the season, unfortunately, when the Padres were kind of out of it. But Bogaerts, that was a scary sight. But thankfully, that's basically it. And Cronenworth going 4 for 4 in this game with 4 RBIs, including a triple, was awesome. And that was the big blow in the top of the first inning, which was fantastic. We also got a sacrifice fly from Ha-Seong Kim. Luis Campusano getting a double, also redeeming himself. And Tyler Wade getting a single in the first inning, making it 5-0. And the Padres made it close. I joked on Twitter that the Padres play in the regular season the way that the Dodgers play in the postseason, which is finding different ways to lose. And that's what happened here. They slowly started making their way back with sacrifice flies, doubles from Will Smith. Mookie Betts got on the action. He hits a home run eventually later in the bottom of the 5th inning off of Michael King, who makes his Padres debut as well in this one. Luis Campusano gets another double. Yeah, by the way, Campusano Hive is thriving as usual. 3 of 6 with 2 doubles, 2 RBIs. I said on the show, a week ago when we were looking at projections, or maybe I think I only played this out of the Padres preview. I do not understand why everyone keeps doubting this guy. I am so in on Luis Campusano. You guys know this. But if you go to different projection sites, say Fangraphs, their projections have him as the 48th total wins above replacement catcher, below guys like Max Stassi, guys that we know can't hit. And my thing is I understand that Campusano has to work on his defense, and I understand that they have Kyle Higashioka as the backup. I don't understand what you're looking at. This is a guy that hits at every level. And then last year, what did he do? Tune a 134 WRC plus. And by the way, if you just want to, will it go down? I don't think he's a 300, 400 on base guy, but in terms of the telltale signs of getting lucky, he was hitting the ball pretty well. He was hitting it hard, and also his WOBA and his expected WOBA were very similar. It was only a 10-point difference. It was barely even a 10-point difference from when I last checked, so it was still high. So my thing is everyone's expecting this big come down from Luis Campusano. I'm like, well, what if he's just going to become one of the better offensive catchers in the league? We'll have to see how the defense goes, but I don't understand why everybody's so down on him. I think it's ridiculous. I really, really do, and I think that you weren't paying attention based off of last year. And shouts to him coming through big time in this game with the 3 for 6 and 2 doubles and 2 RBIs. So shouts to him. But let's talk about Musgrove. Yamamoto, I already said he's got to get used to things, but Joe Musgrove, a major league pitcher, and he really, really struggles in this one. He labors, and the only reason, honestly, that it wasn't talked about is because the Padres scored so much this damn game, right? That was what happened here. And he goes 2 2/3, giving up, let's see here, 5 earned runs on 7 hits, walking 2, striking out 2. He was just struggling a little bit. He gave up some hard hit balls that you're not used to him. He didn't give up the big one, right? He didn't give up the big Ohtani home run, which almost happened again in this one. But I was a little bit surprised just because it felt like he was due after the game before. But instead, that doesn't happen. And here we are. We're sitting here wondering, well, is there reason to be concerned with Joe Musgrove? Well, we're going to talk about that, folks. We got to talk about that in just a second. But before we get into that, folks, let me just take a second to talk to you about Ibarra. We love Ibarra here on the Locked On Padres podcast. We love him, ladies and gentlemen. And here's the thing. In the new year, everyone, it's not the new year anymore, but it's still kind of, what do you guys feel about that? March? Still allowed to say the new year? You're not allowed to say Happy New Year's, but can you say the new year? Whatever. Look, bottom line is when you're starting things off with this kind of new year in fold, with a new baseball season in fold, you're also trying to save money. Everyone's always trying to save money. And Ibarra can help you out with that after every purchase you make, giving you some cash back, folks. It's officially soup season as well, Make sure you get all the ingredients you need because it's going to start getting a little bit colder to match your recipe, and then you get your cash back. That's the whole thing. Oh, it's also baseball season. You want to start making some franks and stuff on the grill? Well, boom, get some cash back when you do that. That's what's going on with Ibotta. It is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies to games to toys, whatever. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $145 per year, and that could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip. Maybe get you a ticket to a Padres game, maybe. I don't know. You know what I mean? It's coming around the corner, folks. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much, and with Ibotta, you just add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and you get real cash that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Join the over 50 million users that are currently saving money with Ibotta, folks. It is offering our listeners, our Locked On Padres listeners, $5 off just for trying Ibotta with the code LOCKEDONMLB. Pretty straightforward, folks. Pretty straightforward. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use the code LOCKEDONMLB. And that's spelled IBOTTA, Ibotta, in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONMLB. Ooh, I'm coming now with a sniffles and a weird sickness mid-ad read, so just hang on with me, folks. But thankfully, we got a familiar old friend here, and it is FanDuel, folks. And here's the thing. March Madness just kicked off. Hopefully you didn't pick Kentucky. I did it because I didn't do a bracket this year. But nevertheless, FanDuel has you covered with all of your college hoops and stuff. And say goodbye to busted brackets, even if you are a person who bet on Kentucky. Don't worry. Don't worry, they got you covered, because whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. New customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. So don't worry if Kentucky's gone. You can still pick the individual games and all that stuff and get a bunch of bonus bets. So there you go. They got you covered, folks. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. And just like that, folks, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast. Yep, we had quite a lot of ad reads, folks. I know. Hey, look, the excitement is here. All the sponsorships, they want to be on the Locked On Padres podcast. They need to cash in. They need to be in on the hype train for this Padres team. And I say that seriously. I do. I am very high on the Padres for this year. I really think that they're going to be a lot better than last year, and I think this game showcased it with the offensive explosion that occurred. And again, I touched on it briefly. Cronenworth, he's one of the ones that I think we're going to be watching a lot in the early going. I think he's one that you have to pay attention to. I think him, Merrill, and potentially, eventually, in my opinion, Graham Pauley. Tyler Wade does get the start in this game, and he goes 2 for 3. Shouts to him. But I think Graham Pauley has bigger upside, and he's a really high upside prospect. You know, I've talked about it. My friend Armley, and he's super high on him. Go check out his work. He's a great prospect analyst, so I'm high on him as well. But other than that, those are kind of the people I'm watching, and they've been succeeding so far for the most part. Jackson Merrill getting his first major league hit, 2 for 5 with a double in this game. Does strike out 3 times, so showing you, that youth, that inexperience, but nonetheless, he looks sharp. There are certain pitches that I feel like I've seen fool young players that they're trying to swing through. And he managed to at least make contact. Yeah, it's foul contact, but he does hit the ball pretty decently hard. In fact, yesterday he had the 4th hardest hit ball of the entire game, with only Manny Machado, Shohei Ohtani, and Fernando Tatis Jr., who actually, I didn't even mention, Tatis had the hardest hit ball of his damn career. 160.7 miles per hour off the bat. It was just a single, but it was pretty sick. And Jackson Merrill was 4th behind Ohtani's single and Manny Machado's home run that, by the way, puts the game away. In the, what was that? Was that the 9th? It was the top of the 9th, right? Manny Machado with the home run. It's funny because when this was happening, my mom's up at super early because I have the game on. And one of the things I mentioned was this is one of those guys that even if you don't know much about baseball, if you saw this kid swing growing up, you know what I mean? If you saw this high school kid with the swing Manny Machado has, even if you're not an expert prospect person, anyone could look at that swing, that gorgeous follow through, and the little, hitch step that he does afterwards to almost push the ball with his hips, it feels like, in a lot of ways. If you don't even know anything about baseball prospecting scouting, I bet you could watch that swing and be like, yo, that kid's pretty good, I bet, right? That kid's probably being scouted heavily, right? Manny Machado with the home run that put it away. And by the way, emphasize, put it away, because it was getting scary with the Dodgers coming back, especially with the Mookie Betts home run and also getting a single later on. Betts was just outstanding. But this isn't about the Dodgers. And I also teased before the episode, I want to talk about Musgrove real quick. He was very shaky in this game, like I said. But I really do think a player like him, it's just not something I'm really overly concerned about. I did get tweeted at about this as well. And my thing is just with a pitcher like him, I'm just not really all that concerned. And he has a repertoire that's like, there's a lot of like fine tuning, I think, that happens with his pitches, because it's not just about overwhelming the opponent with velocity and, just throwing the fastball in different corners of the plate. It's movement and all that stuff. And I just think that there wasn't really anything that scared me. Like the velocity wasn't down for any of his pitches. It was actually up by a tad in certain cases. So that's not a concern. And again, he doesn't rely on that. But I think he's just trying some things out. I think he's getting used to things. This has been one of the most consistent pitchers in the entire sport the last 3 years. I'm not making that up, by the way. Even if we want to talk about like first half, second half splits, Musgrove was one of the only ones in the collapse year in 2021 to be, he didn't follow through with like his ace below 3 ERA status. But if you look up his splits, he was kind of similar in both the first half and the second half. That's what I like about him, is you can just really count on him to always be there for the team, which is great, because this is a team that can occasionally be quite inconsistent, folks. Let me tell you, when it comes to this Padres team, my God, it can be very, very frustrating. And actually, I'm taking a look at his splits right now. Yeah, in terms of the first half, ERA, the FIP is basically the same. ERA is pretty similar as well. Like, yeah, shouts to Joe Musgrove. So I'm not really concerned about him. And I wouldn't be that concerned about Yamamoto. This is a weird game in a different park you're not used to in Seoul. For in the case of both Yamamoto and Musgrove. And remember, Musgrove, everyone was freaking out the Mexico City series last year. He came off that injury with the toe weight room incident, has that start in Mexico City and gets absolutely lit up, but everyone was getting lit up in that city. That they were playing on like a Candyland ballpark, it felt like anything you hit was going out. It was pretty nuts. It was a very entertaining game. That's what this one kind of reminded me of, honestly. The same aura to it. Like the Padres looking for a bounce back and they need their offense, and boom, they step up in a big way. But for me, I think that I'm just not all that concerned. Michael King makes an appearance in this game, and I know he gives up 3 in 3 1/3 innings, but that's basically because of the one mistake to Mookie Betts. A team that, by the way, speaking of struggles with Musgrove and a little bit here with Michael King, it's just not a good team to evaluate your pitcher on, in like short sample size especially. It's never good to evaluate your pitcher in a short sample size, but in this case, it's like, guys, this lineup for the Dodgers is an OPS of like 750 for every player or higher. Like, that's obscene. Like, you have to go against Betts, then Ohtani, then Freeman, then Smith, then Muncy, who's a home run machine, although he did help us win this series, by the way. Shouts to Max Muncy with all the errors. And he also gets a 3 strikeout game yesterday. But Teoscar Hernandez, I know he wasn't amazing last year, but that's a home run threat. James Outman was a borderline rookie of the year. Jason Hayward was really solid last year, 2-win player. Really good. Gavin Lux is probably the only weak point. And that might be the only weak point of the Dodgers, actually, is the defense by Lux and by Muncy. I think could be a little bit of a problem, and you saw it in this series, especially. But for me, I really do believe that this is just not the right team to evaluate pitchers against. And Michael King, for the most part, though, looked really solid. Like, he really, really impressed me in certain moments. I thought the strikeouts he had were really, really good. I like that Tom Cosgrove's velocity was up on his sweeper, by the way, by 1.8 miles per hour. There was just a lot of good, frankly, with this set. Michael King generated 4 whiffs on his changeup. He had nasty stuff. Like, that guy's going to play. As long as he's healthy, it'll play. Like, hear me out. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to be good. I have almost no doubt about that. And Tom Cosgrove, I'd be slightly worried about just because his ERA was low last year, but his xFIP was like 4.9, which is like extremely, extremely high. Not like a 3.6, but a 4.9. So there might be some regression there, which is okay. You can handle some regression, but I do think that this Padres bullpen can be good. I think this Padres starting pitching is going to be good. And I'm excited. So again, not worried about Michael King. I actually think that he looked pretty good. He just got really thrown off, facing Mookie Betts, one of the best players of the game, that the Red Sox were a Manchurian candidate for the Dodgers and decided, well, we need to help them out for no reason. Even though we have all the money in the world, we need to help them out because God forbid anybody, tries to make things easier on the life of the Padres folk. But ladies and gentlemen, that is not it for my thoughts on the game. We have a few more things I want to say, as well as to quickly talk about the Blake Snell signing. I didn't mention that. I haven't mentioned that at all. I haven't talked about it on this podcast. Part of me wishes to pretend it never happened because I love Blake Snell, but we must acknowledge it because that is the job. Sorry, Pac-Man. But before we continue, guys, speaking of job, let me just take a second to read to you about another one of our sponsors, Amazon Fire TV, folks. We love them. We love Amazon Fire TV. You guys know this. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV shows, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball, can't wait for next weekend, or the college basketball tournament that is going on right now, you're going to want to have Fire TV. They're going to have you covered, folks. And they recently created their Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands right to your eyeballs, man. Let me tell you, all for free. That includes all of us here at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. So if you want to, hear the freak out on what's going on with Kentucky, bam, Fire TV channels, they got stuff for you there. For opening day, you want to hear from all the hosts. We just launched our season preview. You saw that go live on the channel yesterday, which is why the scheduling has been a little bit off this week. Look up that. That was really a lot of fun to do. So go check it out, folks. March Madness, NBA, everything. So if you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV to learn more. And just like that, we are back. We are so back here on the Locked On Padres podcast. Final segment of the show. I want to just add, this was a really fun game. Not to freak out about it, but it was really nice to see the Padres coming through with the offense, especially Machado and Cronenworth had both kind of rough batting games the night before. Cronenworth striking out twice. That wasn't great in game one, and then obviously the opposite here. Look, I think that they have a really good lineup, and I know that you'll see a lot of people bring up the problem with the Padres lineup is that it's basically you just got to get rid of the first four guys and then you're good. I just don't think that that's true. I really don't. And with the rumors that they might be signing Tommy Pham, which, we're running out of free agents, by the way. JD Martinez just signed with the Mets. So, it tells me that I think that the Pham rumors are true and they're just figuring out some final things. They had to worry about the Seoul series first. I do think it's going to happen. Jurickson Profar, by the way, in this game, for what it's worth, 0 for 3 with a walk. I just think that, yes, the bottom of their lineup isn't that, exciting, I know, but I do think that there's upside that they have more depth than they used to, right? This is a team that has some players in there, from Eggy Rosario to Graham Pauley to Jackson Merrill to Jurickson Profar to maybe not Tyler Wade, but Tyler Wade, whoever you want to bring up. Maybe later on in the year, a Jacob Marcy, potentially, but I think that those guys can be a lot better. And you have to remember that the depth with the Padres last year also wasn't good, but it was even worse. At DH, they were rocking Nelson Cruz and Matt Carpenter for most of the year. Think about that. With the exception of literally the first 2 weeks of the season when Cruz was just being gifted by the BABIP gods with batting average on balls in play to start. And then Matt Carpenter was basically, if you throw him anything of velocity, he just wasn't hitting it, especially if it was inside. You immediately have upgrades there in terms of hitters. Let's replace the DH spot here in this case with Machado. Okay, that's immediately better than both of them, obviously. Even if it's last year's version of Machado, even if it's the first year version of Padres Manny Machado, you have an upgrade there. And then at third base, my thing is, I will take shots on your Wades and your Eggy Rosarios. Eggy Rosario doesn't get any hit in this game either, unfortunately. And then Graham Pauley, and then Jackson Merrill. And then, by the way, Luis Campusano. Those are all better than what we were rocking last year. Austin Nola was good for a negative F4, I'm pretty sure, for the 50 games that he started before going down with injury with the Padres. And then they were screwed because I think it was Ryan Webster, what was it? Webster Rivas, I think. Who was it that was catching for us for a good portion of last year because of the Nola injury and then the Campusano injury? I forgot who it was. I'm going to see if I could find it real quick. Matthew Batten. Brett Sullivan. There we go. That was what I want to talk about. Brett Sullivan got some at-bats in last year's game. But, like, just immediately, these players have a higher upside, for one, and I just think are better than some of the players they were fielding last year. So while the depth isn't huge, think about that. That's an upgrade there. The catching thing is immediately great. Higashioka is going to be better than whoever we had fielding last year for the majority of it. And then you have Campizano, who just might be one of the best batting catchers in the league soon, at least in the National League. We'll have to see how that pans out. But you see that, and then I say, okay, and then you also have the potential that all of their stars, Tatis, Bogarts, Machado, especially, bounce back. If they bounce back, there's a chance that you don't feel the absence of the Juan Soto in this lineup all that much. I know he was the only one that like produced consistently last year, but think about it. Think about it for a second. If they all are producing, then you're going to forget and be like, oh, wow, yeah, we actually have more players in this lineup. They're getting paid a lot for a good reason. Not to mention Ha-Seong Kim, who I think is going to be great again. Doesn't do anything in this game, by the way. Does get an RBI, but with the sac fly, but only a walk. I wish he was the one that hit the home run. I do, because it was in Korea. I mean, it would have been fun. But nevertheless, you also get hope for Jake Cronenworth having a bounce-back season, which I think them placing him third in the lineup shows they've got some confidence and hope that he can do that. Maybe take advantage of some righty matchups, which is something that he tends to bat better against in his career, and then he can maybe bat in Tatis and Bogarts. I just like the assertion of, we believe in you. You can be better. We know the contract is a little bit of a miss on Preller's part, especially if you're paying him to be a first baseman. But if he could just be a good player, that's what I care about the most right now. And hopefully he is doing that to start off his season. So again, with all of that, I just don't understand the projections in that regard. I don't think it's true that the Padres are just 4 deep. I don't. I think that they've got upside with Merrill and Paulie. I think that Profar can be a decent fourth outfielder bench spot and consistent, give you good at-bats. For some reason, inexplicably, he's better with the Padres. And then you have guys like Eggy Rosario, who can at least maybe field pretty decently. Matthew Batten might be called up at some point, and he actually hit okay in terms of his, straight up sort of numbers last year. 250 batting average, 300 on base. Like, he was 350 on base, I mean. He was actually pretty effective in that regard and had some interesting fielding metrics as well. You combine all of that, and I'm like, this isn't a 4 deep lineup. And remember, they were only like 1 deep last year, and all they needed to do was just hit with runners in scoring position, and they didn't do that. So if they do that this year, I'm telling you, they're going to make up for any of the growing pains in the bottom of the lineup, and the bottom of the lineup is better than what they were fielding in the bottom of last year's lineup, and they might sign Tommy Pham. So I'm really not worried about that. I think this Padres team is really, really good. So that's really exciting. I want to quickly now end the show discussing a little bit Blake Snell. The reason why I want to do that is because he signed with the Giants, in case you hadn't heard. It happened, of course, in the middle of the night. It just happened finally. 2 years, $62 million. I do think that it's actually somewhat interesting, the whole Scott Boras discourse. I am someone who finds that the Scott Boras naysayers have been annoying for the majority of my time covering baseball or following baseball. The reason I say that is because this has been happening not just lately, and that's a key distinction to make, because lately there's actually been weight to the argument of Scott Boras, I think, which is that look how many of his players rejected higher offers, like not, oh, Bellinger wanted $200 million. No, I don't care about that. What I care about is what offers did they reject. In the case of Snell, reportedly last month, a $150 million offer from the Yankees, and reportedly Matt Chapman, a $100 million offer from the Blue Jays. And instead, those two settled for below that, and with player options. Cody Bellinger also settled for a player option heavy contract. So it makes you wonder if Boras is not being a good agent right now and if he's missing. He did hit on Jung-Ho Lee, but what I'm saying is that Boras naysayers have existed since I've been covering baseball, which is since I was not covering, but following baseball since when I was a kid. And my thing has always been, why do you guys hate this dude? Yeah, he's annoying to work with, but he gets guys overpaid. So is that not his job? All of a sudden you guys care about the owner's pockets? So that I don't understand. But in terms of lately, yes, the Boras thing has been weird. And the Snell thing is yet another example of it. 2 years, $31 million. He could opt out after this year after having another great year and then be in next year's class. But in my opinion, next year's free agent class is even more stacked. So there's going to be more options to go, right? So I don't fully know what's going to happen there. Shouts to Snell not giving into the whole city narrative, though, I will say. He was like, I don't know, man. I don't really care. Like, he basically practically said, like, yeah, man, I was going to whoever paid me. You know what I mean? And they're like, by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, good for him. Get your money. You're an unbelievable talent. You should be paid as such. And he's like, yeah, you may have to ask my wife, but she seems to like it. So I like that they weren't giving into that lazy narrative. But with the contract, does this make me scared of the Giants? I'm always scared of the Giants, to be quite frank. And the reason is because they're one of those teams that have that like black magic badge. The Rays are obviously the kings of this. What I mean by that is teams that tend to overcome the very exterior, what's it called? The surface level stats of what their teams look like. You know what I mean? The Rays do it every damn year. That's what it feels like. The Rays do it every year. So never count out the Rays, especially when everyone seems to be counting them out. Even though I have to admit this year, it's a little bit different because they've like lost players to injury and then, you know, some really bad off the field stuff in the case of Wander Franco. But with the Giants, I know it's a team though that they spent the most money on free agents with the exception of the Dodgers. And the Dodgers are in another stratosphere, so you can't really even compare the two. But I am wondering if you are nervous if you're the Padres or if you're a Padres fan about the Giants, which you should be, I think. I think they're going to be okay. Look at it as the Giants took a lot of free agents from a class that a lot of people don't think, and myself included, was that heavy with free agents. It's like they settled for this class because they just need something. And I don't think that's a bad thing they did, settling. I think it's good because they clearly can't attract the big fish right now, and they don't have much of a farm system, so they need to start getting some talent, you know, just somewhere to start. You know what I mean? They need to go somewhere. And I think that's what they did here. Yes, the possibility of the Logan Webb, Snell two-headed Hydra is scary. Those are the top two voters in Cy Young last year. That could be rough, for sure. I do think so. And it's two really, really effective pitchers. Logan Webb is so damn good. So don't get me wrong, that does scare me. But the lack of sureness on a lot of their team, from Tyro Estrada to even my boy Michael Conforto, to players, and then the weirdness of the way they dropped JD Davis, you should be concerned, but I don't think this is like some team that all of a sudden should be the clear favorite to finish second in the National League West. I just don't, because I don't think that they have a lot of proven talent on that team in terms of the bats. I think they've got some good players, but they've been missing stars for a while now. And when I look at that team, I'm like, yeah, Lamont Wade's a really solid player. I was campaigning for, if the Padres traded him, for him to be a player that they acquire. That is true in the trade. But in terms of the rest of the team, you know, Jung Ho Lee's, it's this major league debut. You know, I mean, he's coming from the KBO. We'll see how that goes. Nick Ahmed is your starting shortstop. That's not great while Luciano gets ready, their top shortstop prospect. And then after Logan Webb and Blake Snell, Kyle Harrison's a prospect. Alex Cobb, we have to see when he gets back. Jordan Hicks, maybe he's their Seth Lugo, right? I think that they can be good, don't get me wrong, but don't freak out. Don't freak out. And again, Blake Snell did have a crazy high walk rate last year, and I know he's working with Melvin now, so both of them are now our enemies, you know, mortal enemies, but I wouldn't be freaking out too much, because I do think that there's this distinct possibility that the Giants really just went off in a free agent class that doesn't have all that much, compared to maybe potential years going forward, or even in the past. So that's just me. But alas, what do I know? What do I know? Maybe I'm just feeling myself a little bit too much because of that. But I say all that to end by saying the next time the Padres play, it will be against the San Francisco Giants to kick off their regular season. That's going to be a lot of fun. They've got a 2-game set against the Mariners in terms of spring training. But after that, 4-game set starting on Thursday. Can't wait to talk about that. And we will be covering it next week on the podcast, especially the Thursday game, and then going into the rest. May do a crossover preview with Ben Kaspick of Locked On Giants as well. That should be a lot of fun. And then they play the Cardinals and then Giants again. So it's going to be really relevant talking about the Giants, and we're going to learn a lot, I think, about both teams, especially in some of their young guys, some of their unproven talent. Should be a lot of fun. Jung Ho Lee for them, Jackson Merrill, Dylan Cease, guys like that for us. So that should be a lot of fun. Also, speaking in terms of next week, before we wind down, guys, I want to say we're going to do, hopefully, a crossover, talk about those Giants games, talk about when, in my opinion, the Padres signed Tommy Pham to a contract. But we will also be going over past trade targets, past trades that AJ Preller has made to coincide with an episode we were going to do on Tuesday about my going the opposite route of why the Dylan Cease trade could be good. I'm just going to be playing devil's advocate. I do think it's a good trade, but I do think that there's a lot of concern, and I think that there's a fair amount of concern, and I think that that's going to be something we have to discuss. So I want to give like the devil's advocate. That'll be Tuesday's episode after the mailbag, and then Wednesday we're going to be talking about all those trades that AJ Preller has made, the big ones, and kind of saying, let's look at his rap sheet. Do you trust him on this Dylan Cease one, given all the trades he's made in the past? All the big ones. We're going to talk about that as well. Whether or not he gets a little bit overhated and underrated for certain moves, that should be a lot of fun. So look forward to that. Look forward to the crossovers. Look forward to everything. And look forward to just good vibes. You know, it seems like we're at a good vibe moment right now. I don't know about you guys. That's what it feels like. We are being fed great entertainment, it feels like. X-Men 97. Dragon's Dogma 2 apparently is great. There's definitely something else out there I don't know about. I forgot. Shogun is amazing. That's a great show. All sorts of good stuff, guys. March Madness. You know, it's good vibes. Good vibes, ladies and gentlemen. But with that all being said, that about does it for today's edition, finally, of the Locked On Padres podcast. The only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Follow myself on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiipeno. And until next time, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful. My Friar Faithful homies. Take care.